So we're going to jump into game 5. Bryce, Frodan, take us through it.
All right, here we go. Game 5, Lobby B, the penultimate game that will help find out who is joining us for Championship Sunday and who will be walking away with regrets, just narrowly missing their chance for TFT immortality. Let's hop on board with Cloud9 K3 Soju, who is coming off of a pretty strong performance that previous game. And it does seem like he's in a good position with a couple of solid finishes. The advantage of Soju's spot, he only needs a couple of decent placements. Doesn't have to go for gold.
Yeah, he started Negatron Cloak in this game, which, when I did my interviews of all the different players of starting item, this was the only item that literally no one in the field was remotely interested in starting. And in fact, most people were saying, it's all pretty much fine except for Cloak. On the plus side for Soju, he has a early armor to go with that, and he can build a Gargoyle Stoneplate. And it is Spell Sword Enchantment, which is such a good Deja line. And if you slam an early Gargoyle Stoneplate, probably the best holder of that in the game right now is Itis. So if you're going to start Cloak, this is the other conditions you would like to see in order to make it work.
Oh, it does get a glove, though, and that's not what he wanted to see. However, just like you said, at least he has a playable item, but if he gets a second cloak, that's when things get a little bit dicey. We'll see. In the meantime, Soju also seems to be going back to playing his Xayah core. That's what he actually climbed very early in the set, playing a ton of Xayah, so he seems very well versed in it. But when you look at Soju a little bit closer, it does still seem that he's open to playing anything, and I feel like with this item set, you really can play anything.
Yeah, you really can, right? You're very likely to wind up slamming this Gargoyle Stoneplate. I think it's the only combination of items that really makes sense as a 2-1 slam. He gets some really good units. Wow, he insta-sells the Kaisa there in order to hold the Malphite pair. He gets Cyber Uplink, so that would be good if he was playing into the Lagoon line potentially, although no Tears, no ZZ Rock components, so maybe he would want to go there anyway. Yeah, no Kaisa, that's also a low-key kind of big deal.
Oh,
sticking with the Cyber anyway.
The punish.
Yeah, it is, although I will say that this is also a very good augment to be played when you're going to be playing around Deja as well, so I would assume that's Soju's primary game plan from here.
Yeah, and he also could level for Jay, so you know what? Ends up not being that big of a deal, but the Cyber Uplink with the Lagoon, would have been ideal. And not only that, he could have even theoretically leaned into Kaisa because he would have the Stone Plate plus the glove. But hey, look, his opening is perfectly reasonable. And we'll see if he ends up tagging this glove. Usually it goes on like the Karma because she can utilize an assortment of glove items. Interesting that he also prioritizes putting the Jade a little bit higher up. We've been seeing more people do this and not prioritize putting all units around that Jade statue for the buff. Do you like it?
In particular, I like it in this spot because he wants to play around the Gargoyle, which means he needs this Malphite to be full tanking at the start of these fights, which means it becomes a little bit trickier if you have to crowd a whole bunch of units around it. But in this situation, he's saying, hey, the healing value onto the Karma in the backline is not nearly as high, and so he's comfortable playing around it this way, but he's going up against Sag that also has a very generically powerful opening. This is going to be a super close fight, but I'm pretty sure Sag is going to win it. This is a Karma 2 diff here. Soju would love to have had that upgrade as well, but it wasn't meant to be here. Moving over to Goobum's board, who has Beast Den. This is such a fun augment, providing attack speed for every unit that is attached or that is adjacent to a shapeshifter. Where do we think we lean from here?
It could go into a couple of different areas. It's just whatever units really like playing a Gnar, a Jace, and most likely a Shyvana, although it's not important. And you kind of realize that Jace can link to a bunch of different things. The first thing that stands out to me is just straight up playing Jade. When you look at the vertical Jade in particular, what makes it really powerful is the longer the fight goes, the more attack speed that you're stacking. Beast then gives you that initial attack speed, which can help scale other things. In this regard, you can even start thinking about different itemization of how you want to play Shio Yu, for example, or even Siphon. You want to play things like Rage Blade, you actually can get away with it because you have that jump start of attack speed, which helps scales that attack speed even further.
Yeah, it makes tons of sense. You can see Xayah as another possible line there because it naturally plays Jace, and then you can also wind up playing Shyvana as well as part of the top end. So you have a couple of options from here if you're Goobums, and Goobum's one of the widest players players in the field, so he knows those outs for sure, and he probably has many other outs in mind.
The other out is that with Beastin in particular, you actually can go back to the Guild Deja variation because it's Spell Sword enchantment. You get that attack speed to scale up your AP, so that is a possibility as well. So keep out all those different trees, and that's what Goobums has to juggle. The only caveat, he started Vest. He got a Vest and a Cloak, so his itemization is a little bit scuffed.
Yeah. So we hop on board with Sag for the first time. We've actually watched both of Sag's first fights from the other player's perspective, which means we watch two players, our main hero, win while lose, while our villain Sag has won 2 fights in a row, going up against Sully, who's lost a couple fights, has that early better together augment, so he's got some extra value. But Sag's board is just very, very well constructed. He's got a nice little front line with the Nasus 2, plus he's got another Guardian to give the Guardian buff, and then he's got 2 great sources of damage and a Karma 2, and this Volibear. We've talked about it once. We'll talk about it many more times over the course of this tournament. This Volibear unit is absolutely illegal, specifically in the early game. It is just such a powerful unit. He's also 1 Jax away from being able to get Shimmer Scale online, depending on what item that is. It could really snowball Sag's game. He's in an excellent spot, and he needs it at 11th place, 16 points.
Well, Goobums ends up taking the loss, meaning that Sag is the only person still at 100 HP playing for that streak. As we take a look at the Stage 2 carousel, as well as taking a deeper look at their augments. So you have 2 Cyber Uplinks in Burt and Soju, another strong combat augment in Goobums, and then Sag and Ramblin with healing-based augments. Kurum takes Trade Sector, which seems to be an augment that's getting a lot more play today. I just feel like Trade Sector, for me, I've just never really seen a lot of people have success with it because it falls off unless you high roll super hard early or you're playing a reroll-based strategy. And we've seen success with the reroll strategy, except Kurum's not really a reroll player. However, I have to point to one thing. He did just reroll Yone 3 and 1, so I wonder if that's changing some of his game plan as he's seeing his augment choices.
Yeah, we've seen a couple of viable real-world strategies. Yone and Kaisa certainly top the charts on that, so we'll have to keep an eye on his spot, figure out what items he has, and see if he can play in either of those directions. He could also just be using it for tempo. Meanwhile, Sag was able to find that Jax, and he is able to get that Shimmer Scale online. He's got a Mogul's Mail, which is not the best, not the worst he could have gotten in this situation.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it kind of depends on how he views his setup, but his item spread is a little bit awkward moving forward. I guess he's just trying to maximize his win chance. Even having an additional injection of health and just a little bit more ability power is good enough. But as you can see, doesn't really need it to get the wins, and is able to rack up the gold. So Sag, a big Deja player, loves incorporating it into his game plan. Very clearly going to angle for it. We'll see who else can contest it for it.
Yeah, very clearly angling for it, and there's great top end as we've seen, right? Kyvix a couple of games ago, he just immediately gets the Deja board online, goes to level 9, ultimately caps out and wins a lobby with Aurelion Soul. I think that is a core game plan for anyone who leans AP in a good Mirage tree, and Spell Sword is certainly one of those. The Jeweled Gauntlet also will synergize very well because Spell Sword ramps up its AP naturally over the course of a fight just by attacking. So if Sag can find his way into an early Deja, he will be cooking with some gas. He has one more fight to go. He's got Kurum as the highest HP in his pool. Very, very likely to be able to maintain his streak here because he has a combat augment. Kurum does not, but there's a Volibear on the other side and an upgraded Zac, so you never know how these things are going to shake out.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, Kurum does have a reasonably strong board, and it depends on how long these Guardians can hold, but I just feel like the support for Sag is better, not to mention there's Celestial Blessing 2. So if you're talking about equal boards, but one person has Trade Sector and the other has CB2, pretty sure you know how it's favored for the CB2 player. That being said, this Volibear is not getting attacked, and so it actually comes down meaningful to amount of the pathing. And so Sag losing this is actually a huge deal. Wow. So you can see how a small thing like the Volibear in the back versus the second row Hex makes a profound difference because the walk up from the Volibear ends up targeting the opponent's Volibear for Kurum, and that was a difference maker. Very subtle positioning that ends up paying off huge dividends.
Yeah, that plus the Zeke, so 2 completed items, plus the Morello Nomicon Slam means that the value of Sag's combat augment was cut in half functionally over the course of that fight. So a lot of little things panning out there, and that's really, really good for the rest of the lobby, being able to deny Sag that win streak. Soju actually, after losing the first fight, able to grab 4 wins in a row. Sully and Asa on the bottom of the charts at 70 and 60 HP respectively.
Yeah, really well done by Soju in particular. You saw how awkward it is starting Cloak, able to get that stage 2 streak. Very nice indeed. Taking a look at Kurum, oh dear, only 1 component drop with a mostly amount of gold. And that's not a bad thing to get a lot of gold, but it just feels like he doesn't have much to work with, especially if the 1 component that dropped his Cloak is going to go for a level and roll. Finds immediately a Swain. Doesn't even consider it. Okay.
Yeah, doesn't even consider it. Didn't want to pivot into the Dark Flight line, despite the fact that he had the Zeeks and the Morello Nomicon, which makes a lot of sense, but it's just, I guess, not core to Kurum's strategy. Something that is core to Kurum's strategy is trying to play strong boards early, middle, and late. I think it's part of the reason he's had success this tournament. Very good at preserving HP, not afraid to roll. And in this situation, both of these players are really, really trying to get the win. Soju on a 4 streak, Kurum on a 3 streak. Who is going to reign supreme?
Yeah, it really depends on whether or not this Volibear can sell out and get a ton of damage. Looks like no one's really focusing it right now. Volibear somehow infiltrating enemy lines, going completely unnoticed despite being the biggest target now. And the big key to that is the Zac too, just tanking with that Mogul's Mail, stacking up to 40. Everyone's still focusing. It's 26 seconds into the fight, and we still have Karma focusing down the Zac. The Zac didn't even die. Goes to show you the prominence of Guardians, especially when you can get them online with 2-star and stacking resistances like that. Extremely powerful.
Yeah, Kurum leaning super hard into his tempo, rolling deep there to ensure his win streak.
Oh
my God! He gets the Volibear, and the
No!
Deja that he is not interested in playing from this position, despite the fact that his spell sword, he feels like all of these other upgrades that he's been able to secure off of the trade sector are enough. He does not want to dismantle his board with this kind of classic iteration of the Shimmer Scale Lagoon mid-game option.
Okay, I see it though. His entire board's upgraded.
I see it.
So you have to take 2 units out, but man, was that painful. You know what? At least maybe buy it. Just at least dance a little with Deja before you send her home empty-handed. Like, come on.
Yeah, on a lobby where basically the entire group of people are angling Deja on some level, he gets it offered in his shop and has no interest in it. So just absolutely tough or interesting spot. We're checking out Sully.
Oh my God, he's playing
Is
Lilia.
Is it happening?
He is. He has 3 items on Lilia, and these are 3 items to be perceived to be of the best that Liliakin has to offer. He has Bear Together, which means all he needs is a Chalice, and he has the Dark Flight pieces put together. So for people who aren't familiar with this, you sacrifice Dark Flight units, or rather you sacrifice a unit to Dark Flight, so you get 2 Chalices instead of 1, and that way you can get a free amount of AP for Lilia to one-shot units in the front line. The only caveat is that I feel like the meta is quite hostile to this build, Bryce. I just haven't really seen many people find good success. I've seen people maybe scrap a top 4. I've seen one person almost make a top 2 run recently, but the last time I saw this win was a week and a half ago during the Brazilian regional qualifiers.
Yeah, it just feels like single target AP damage can be very susceptible unless it's going to do crazy amounts of damage, and I have not seen Lilia pull that off. I know that you study a lot of other regions. I think you've seen this probably 6 or 7 times over the course of the last few days of the different regions.
Even this morning.
Regionals. Yeah, even this morning. How many of those actually top 4'd?
One.
And
it was
it a
barely a 4th.
Okay, all right. So
it was like they died the same time and they preserved just enough HP.
Okay, so we are nervous for Sully, but that being said, he does have 6 Lilias already on 3-3 plus 40 gold. So if there's any situation where you might be able to make this work, I think this is it. He's got 3 items on Lilia already for the tempo. He's sacrificing a locket, which is really good right now, and ultimately would love to be able to get those Chalice components in, assuming he knows this dark tech.
I mean, how could you not be cheering for this guy if he's willing to put his tournament life effectively on the line by playing Lilia reroll? Is he able to stop this Volibear? It is another loss to Sag. So it's looking good for Sully. Does not have the challenge just yet. That is another caveat. Hopefully he's able to get it on early enough before the Stage 4 carousel. But we'll have to see as we take a look at the Stage 3 breakpoint here and see what augments and items people are going to be getting.
So Goobums is officially committed to his line with the press the attack. We know he's going to be leaning towards the Zaya composition, which is one of the outs we talked about. We see Sag took scoped weapons, which is interesting considering he's got the Jewel Gauntlet slammed, and then Asa with this unbelievably interesting combination of augments in the Clear Mind and Built Different. Built Different is an augment that most people think of as a tempo-oriented augment. You play from ahead early, you streak, you play around the good units. Oftentimes it's like Graves, Neela, some of the generics, but hey, you know, I guess he's down at the bottom in HP and he's going to try to make it work anyway.
It's a Neela too. The one thing about Clear Mind is it helps you get to the level 7, level 8 point where you can re-roll. What makes it kind of awkward is that if you have pairs that you're trying to hit for Built Different, are you actually going to be able to hold on to them, or do you have to commit to them? So Asa's board state is going to be very interesting to watch as it continues to develop. Taking a look at Sully, one of the funny things about the scale score dynamic is that you're sacrificing Olaf, which actually does scale his passive AD, but he never actually gets to play on the field, so kind of an ironic moment in the scale score line.
Yeah, this Olaf is sacking to infinity. I remember in PBE there were theories about using Darkflight to guarantee the stacks. It never quite panned out that way. Going up against Ramblin', who is on the Soam line, right, the more vertical version of the Lagoon. He actually already has 180 Lagoon stacks at 3-5. Not a bad spot for Ramblin'. He also has that Soam already. No other Soam items, though he does have 50% of each of the core items. He's got one tier, so wants one more tier for blue buff, and he's got one belt, so he wants a rod from Relonomicon. Not a bad spot for Ramblin'.
Yeah, and he has a lot of money. I think that's a really big component. Some people who get to that spot for like a relatively stable Soam Lagoon Mages board ends up sacrificing a ton of economy to get to that point. And this might be part of it too. Asa has Neela too, which is a unit that Ramblin' would theoretically be rolling for anyway, so some of the dynamics in the lobby may be playing out in this way. Another weird thing about Build Different is we've been seeing a lot of people re-roll a lot of the lower cost units with it, but seems like Asa instead is going to be not going for the re-roll, but trying to capitalize on tempo.
Yeah, great positioning here from Asa. Gets that Neela directly onto the Soam, and it wins the 50-50 in terms of what it aggroes onto. So Soam is going to go down early in this fight. Asa should get another fight win, which is mission critical for him because he snapped a big losing streak and he has to get his econ recovered in order to ultimately get to level 8 and get some big upgrades around his core units. So Asa playing an unusual line, Clear Mind, Built Different, not something we see every day, but if anyone can pilot it, it's Asa. He has a lot of experience in Built Different specifically.
Don't look now. Sully, as you saw on the bottom of the screen, able to put in 3 in a row. 4 out of 5 on stage 3. Maybe some Lilia magic, the Enchanted Forest, may make its way to the Convergence. We're taking a look at Bertosaurus at the very end here. Oh, a 3-star Lilia has been made by Sully. And Soju, in case you missed it, has an Aurelian Soul that he picked up a couple rounds ago. But let's focus on the now here for Bird. A player who's under the gun comes in the same bucket as Pocket Gum. This could theoretically be one of the last times we see Bird compete, especially on the regional stage. What can he do to turn his game around?
Yeah, look, if you're going to put anyone with their back up against the wall, I want to be Bird, and that belt is huge. It's going to allow him to slam that Zeke's, which is so critical for this composition. We know he wants to be playing around Seraphine Graves. He's already got one copy of Graves. There's a second copy of Graves. Can he hit some of these upgrades? We need a Seraphine. One more Graves would be awesome as well. That Bard is great, but it's your level 8 unit. It's hard for me to imagine him breaking up the board for this. He's rolling super deep, really wants to find that Graves.
Yeah, doesn't have Graves too, but still has all the 7 units that he needs. Needs to also get in the right position for Zeke's.
Oh.
Is he even going to slam that Zeke's then? Looks like he's just trying to stack items for this round and then see what ends up happening. He doesn't get a remover for quite some time. You need to get to 220 Lagoon stacks to get that remover. His next big breakpoint he's looking for is 140 for another item component. Burke can't take that many heavy losses, though. A little bit tough. At least it's a good loss to his buddy Goob. But things are definitely dicey here for Bert, to say the least.
Yeah, I'm really worried about Bert's spot. You know, it's just he really needs to go top 2. He's super low on HP. We have seen some epic comebacks, especially Goobums earlier on the Seraphine line with a really, really big comeback, eking out a 4th place in that game. But Burt needs a lot more than a 1st place. He does get offered one of the best augments you can get here. He insta-picks the Cybernetic Shell. This is a composition that is really the sum of its parts, right? All of the different units are pitching in, which is absolutely important for the cyber augments. We see him rolling all the way to 0 here. 5 copies of Seraphine. He's got pairs of Graves and Pantheon each, but that is all that he's got, and it is just it's a dubious proposition for him trying to find his way into a top 4. Meanwhile, we're looking at Ramblin's roll down. He's fast 8'd. He's gone to level 8. It looks like he is committed around this Sohm line. Yep, there we go. We are officially committed to the Sohm line. He was thinking about Deja, but he's passed on that.
Nice.
And he winds up hitting the Sohm too. That is such a big spike for Ramblin, who has been doing really well overall in this tournament and is probably locked in a top 4 from that hit alone.
We'll see. He doesn't have Neela and doesn't have a lot of that big mage augment, so we'll see. Oh my goodness. Sully has that 3-star Lilia. Still no Chalice though, but that tier is just chilling on the bench. So a good time to play Sully relative to where Sully could be at the end of this stage. Graves versus Lilia. Lilia dunks it. Eep, watch out! And just like that, Burt is going to take another massive loss and have that little breathing room remaining in order to pull himself out of his deficit. He's just down to 24 HP.
Yeah, down to 24 HP, really struggling. Soju also struggling and has been falling a little bit in HP, down to 46. Asa has stabilized his board at 48 and is win streaking, and Sully has also been able to maintain a win streak. We're starting to get very condensed HP-wise with Burt kind of falling away from the pack, so not looking good. Meanwhile,
okay,
Soju actually has
two
Aurelian Souls on level 7.
It looks like one of those days for Soju, right? And being very candid, that's kind of the day that Kyvix is having,
yeah.
and certain parts of Rain's day where just sometimes the game doesn't let you buff. And Soju seems to be primed in that position. However, his HP count is still low, and we have seen Aurelian Soul as the solo dragon boards flounder a lot. In fact, it's one of the worst averaging comps. I put that in quotation marks because most people who die don't finish their comp. But if you were to look at it, if you are unable to pair multiple dragons with Aurelian Soul, it is one of the worst performing data statistics we have.
Yeah, and the big issue for Soju is going to be his itemization, right? He only has this one bow. We assume it's going to want to become a Giant Slayer, but he's a long way away from the type of items that you really want onto Aurelian Soul. You want damage amplification. You ideally like something that keeps it safe. Gunblade is one example. We've also seen Edge of Night wind up being a decent item onto this Aurelian Soul. So Treasure Dragon is going to actually be hugely important for Soju, assuming he can get there, which he should be able to. 39 HP for a couple more fights, so we're going to need to be very greedy. He does have quite a bit of economy to transition his board, so I'm not worried about him just yet.
Meanwhile, Bertosaurus, 13 HP. And I hate to say it like this, but if he goes 8th here, I'm pretty sure there's no chance for him to advance to day number 3. It's time to put pedal to the metal and see whether or not he can pull off another Burt special. The Burt special is putting himself in the situation and narrowly squeaking out like a 4th or a 5th or even a top 3. But we know Burt needs more than that, because in these last 2 games, he's so far behind, he needs every single point he can muster.
Yeah, he really, really does need more than that. We're not going to sing his swan song until he is done, so hopefully he's able to pull it together. Goobums, meanwhile, transitioning his board, playing around the Itis variant of the Xayah. It's really strong. He's also got a Titan's Vow, or Titan's Resolve, which is going to be really good into that Rengar matchup, which we know is in his pool. Soju is rolling down. He's got an upgraded Yu that wants to find its way onto his board somehow. How is he going to choose to fit it? He's putting in Deja.
Okay.
I think it's possible that we're a little dizzy here.
Yeah.
But he does seem to want to play around. Deja is his core strategy. We talked earlier about Spell Sword. He's got that Rage Blade, plus he's got some extra gloves available to him. So he's in a good spot if he can actually hit some. But we are a little ways away from that Deja, choosing to hold on to both the Shio U2 and the pair of Asols. There's a crazy amount of gold on this man's bench.
Yeah, and he unfortunately queues up in the Goobums, who is very strong as well. Did commit a lot of gold to the roll down. I think Soju did get really dizzy, and based off his itemization, you can kind of tell that he does want to lean into that Deja, but the problem is the rest of his board isn't there to support the Deja. He's playing a mishmash of Bruisers and Guardians needs to have a cohesive strategy come together. And so you can see a big sell of his board, but doesn't actually have that much gold to complete it. Does find a second Terra.
Okay. We have to sell the Terra pair. He just feels very far away. We're definitely on the dizzier side of things. We're going to play a 4-dragon variant with the Itis.
This can work.
This can work. Okay, he gets some last-second repositioning, so he's going to be able to get value out of that Randuin's. We're going to be able to get the Declaw on. He can go with oh, the problem is he really wants to Thieves Gloves that, so we're going to Randuin's. We're going to Randuin's the Acel, and Bert is in the lower right-hand corner, fighting for his tournament life, fighting for his TFT life in many senses. Can Bert win one more and hold on, or is this the end of the road for him?
I mean, we'll have to find out. His board looks like it's pretty strong, actually. I'm still surprised that he lost despite hitting Graves too. Looks like he got a win, so at least gets to play for Treasure Dragon. Meanwhile, Soju would love the opportunity to maximize his HP for Treasure Dragon. Looks like this Itis 3-item set is good enough to deal big damage to Sag, who looked very good at the beginning of the game. Seems like he is falling down precipitously as we take a look at these items. RFC and Gunblade for the Spellsword Deja. Does it get any better than that?
No, it does not get any better than this, especially on Chaos Dragon. Sometimes the Chaos works in your favor, sometimes it works against you, but that is illegal how much that was high roll. He also has a remover with it, so he can take that bow off for the Zizirot, and maybe this is just Soju's day. We were talking about it. It feels like he's had a bunch of high roll moments already, but this one is going to top the charts because, holy God, is that a crazy Treasure Dragon.
I don't want to see any Twitlongers for at least another 2 weeks.
Yeah. Agreed. There's a 2-week moratorium on any complaints at Mortdog, be they in Twitlonger format, regular Twitter format, Reddit format, Discord format. It is all off the table, Soju. It is just on you, my friend. All of the pieces are in place. Can you turn this into a top 4? Can you finally make day 3 at regionals?
he made day 3 at regionals in set 5,
fair.
but he's been day 2 almost every tournament since, with a couple of day 1s. So Soju here to rewrite his own story, ends up committing to kind of an interesting corner Jade scenario. I wonder if anyone had a Blitzcrank hook, the Rocket Propel Fist, so Soju was playing around that. It's going up against Bertosaurus. Who will get the right to keep playing on? Can Bert survive and deal big critical damage to Soju, putting him in jeopardy, falling outside the top 8? The Wind Blast is good, covers a lot of the field.
Oh no, that's it.
Oh, but Bert has lost his damage. He's lost his HP, and he has lost his chance to compete for day 3 at regionals.
Wow, that is devastating. We have to take a moment to take a step back from the game for a second, because Bertosaurus is a quiet player, not a popular streamer, not someone that makes the list of someone's fan favorite. But when you ask any good North American Teamfight Tactics player to list the best players in the history of North America, Bertosaurus is going to be on the top 10 list of the vast majority of them. A special player, a very wonderful human being who's going to be taking a large step back from the game. I'm sad he will not be making the end of regionals, but he has so much to be proud of in his TFT career. GG's, Bert.
Hey, never say never. TFT is a game that you can always come back to. We'll see. But for now, we say goodbye to Bert. And we say hello to Ramblin', who is fighting for his lobby life. I'm not sure how Ramblin' keeps getting themselves into spots where it looks so good. I mean, Bryce, you were saying top 4 almost feels guaranteed, and now I feel like top 4 is almost a pipe dream.
Yeah, I blame myself for this. Sometimes I forget that with great power comes great responsibility. I am a caster now, and I know better than this. I have been an esports fan for far too long. The rest of this game just did not work out for Ramblin', and that is very scary overall. He is not going to die here, but he's going to get pretty darn close, and any points that he can earn are going to matter, because it's looking like the point threshold is going to be around 27.
Oh, he is dead. It was a delayed reaction off of the HP, and I was worried because a lot of the units that survived were dragons. Ramblin' takes a 7th. That is so unfortunate.
God, we have another final game to sweat for Ramblin'. He's going to get up to 24 points, going to need at least 3 points, maybe 4, maybe 5 in the final, and Ramblin' in tiebreakers is pretty terrifying, especially since we already used our one time yesterday, so we need him to get above the threshold today. I'm very worried about it, but we've got another game to play, so time is going to tell. Meanwhile, we're joining Sag, who has a very strong board. He's got an upgraded Itis with a great itemization. No real big resistances on it, I guess is the chief knock on the itemization, and he's got a very strong iteration of Deja as well. Maybe he just hit this board. I'm surprised he's a little bit low on HP given his board state.
Yeah, going up against Goobums, who has a very strong board. Love this double Titans Zaya as well. I think it's just a really underrated item on her, especially if you can build those resistances. And the full heal just makes it really difficult for things like this Deja to wipe in the back line. Deja's not even aiming at it. The Wind Blast is heading over towards Narnia.
God.
Sag is taking big damage. If all these units survive, there's at least 4, and he is dead. A devastating loss for Sag.
Yeah, really bad for Sag, getting to 19 points, which means he's going to need a full first in the next game to get that 27-point threshold. Such a tough spot, considering I felt like his board state was actually quite good. Maybe it was matchmaking RNG. Maybe this lobby is just overall too high roll for him, but a devastating 6th place for Sag. Asa eking out of 5th place, and he needs every point he can get as well. After having a bottom finish in 8th place in the last game, he's at 19 points overall for the tournament.
Bertosaurus out in 8th. Bye-bye, Bird. Ramblin' once again put under the tiebreaker Russian roulette. And Dej is looking like he has to play the game of his life going into game number 6. Meanwhile, Houdini has done it again from a spot that looks doomed. Asa somehow is playing for a top 4. I think 5th is where we drop off here. I think Asa got as much mileage as he possibly can. But that is the mark of elite team fight tactics. Even if Ace is not able to get this fight versus Kern's board, which looks quite strong and sturdy, he's played a hell of a game with TFT.
Yeah, he has, and he's going to be on the bubble as well, because if he goes 5th in this game, then he's got 4 more points, 23 overall, which means he's going to need at least a 5th to get 27,
oh, these
4th to get over. These Nilas are just jumping all over the place, resetting through these shields, but there is a Graves left over, and I just don't think that Nila's going to be able to do it against this Graves. It's dancing around, but as long as it doesn't drop the aggro, I think that's going to be it, but it's healing so much, but eventually the Edge of Night procs, and that spells doom for Asa in this game. He is out in 5th, and we have our top 4 secured.
Twice we've seen Asa, at least when Bryce and I've been casting, where it looks like it's so easy to be a 7th or 8th place, and it feels like 5th was his possible maximization from his position specifically. Great 5th for Asa. As we take a look, and it is a celebration. There's raptures in the streets of Minnesota right now. We have Sully TFT with a top 4 with Lilia reroll.
If you think there's raptures in the streets of Minneapolis, imagine what is happening in Twitch chat as we see Eep solidly in the top 4 with 42 HP to spare. He is going level 9 and trying to cap out this board even higher. Could we see an Eep in the top 2?
Okay, let's not get too crazy here. Soju has a very strong board with Dragon's Claw. Wait! The Itis ended up dying, and the Lilia's not being targeted yet. Usually, by the time Itis drops, Lilia gets targeted, and Lilia's gonna be able to dunk the rest of this comp. Oh my gosh!
Wow, the believers are rewarded. Sully gets another fight win in an excellent position overall in this game. Gets a Giant Slayer as well. Not a bad 3rd item to be able to throw onto this Diana in this 5 Cavalier 4 scale scorn board with the tech. He is a knower. We talked about it at the beginning of the game. Does he know to sacrifice the Chalice as part of this line? And yes, he does. This is homework paying off for Sully.
Absolutely, and able to whip out a comp that a lot of people are not even willing to touch. I'm pretty sure everybody in this field knows about Lilia reroll, as we do find a duplicator. I wonder how we'll utilize that. We have a Hecarim pair. But more importantly, having the balls to be able to pull it off. And I just think that Sully is showing you what you can do if you're willing to push TFT to his limits. Finds the ability to go to 9 and push for 6 Cavalier. And this is really strong because of the recent buffs to Cavalier in particular. We'll see whether or not this is enough to hold off, because Goobum just hit level 9, and we know Kerm is playing a very strong board. And part of what makes things like the Lilia reroll tough is because Seraphine is in the meta to shield against a lot of her big burst.
Yeah, it is, but there's just so much tankiness onto this Lilia with the 6 Cavalier. Maybe it's going to be able to survive long enough to win a War of Attrition against the War of Attrition comp. Kurum is also at level 9. He's got better together with multiple lockets as well as double Zeeks in the back. It's Lilia versus Graves, and I don't think Lilia wins that matchup. Graves has taken down the Eep, taken down the damage for Soli, and it looks like Soli's win streak is going to be snapped at 2 here, but plenty of life left over. Meanwhile, in the lower right-hand corner of your screen, you're seeing Soju looks like getting a fight win against Goobum, so he is hanging around. I think this is still an open question on who's going to win this game. It's hard for me to envision Soli getting there just because the Seraphine matchup is so tough, but could Goobums or Soju ultimately get to a power level to deal with Kurum, or is it Kurum's lobby?
So Zaya's an interesting matchup for Lilia because so many units just dip. You have Rakan, which dashes past, so sometimes just abandons the Zaya. Then you have Shyvana, who ascends into the sky, so she dips. And then you have Jace, who kind of like goes forward, and sometimes Lilia like runs past it. There's some really weird like positioning in that matchup that makes me feel like if Sully goes up against Soju, or rather start going against Goobums, can find an edge if the positioning works out nicely.
Yeah, it is a really interesting matchup, and not one that I can say I've studied a whole lot of, but we're about to get the answer to the question. Goobums with insane Thieves' Gloves items onto that Jace. Jace is going to be able to add a meaningful amount of extra damage in this fight. The Shyvana is already into the Dragon's Den, but Zaya is gone! Diana makes its way to the backline. You were talking about the problem with Zaya being that she can be abandoned, and she did! Goobums' whole team is like, well, bye Zaya, we're going to go do our thing, and you know, the result of that is roughly 100 units left alive on Soli's board and roughly 0 left alive on Goobums' board.
The Cavaliers run forward, right, and Diana just gets free pickings. It's just a very unusual situation, and Goobums, I don't know how much better you could have positioned versus that comp. It's not like frontlining Zaya would have made things easier.
Yeah. I don't know that there was an answer to that. Sometimes there's just a rock, paper, scissors dynamic to TFT. I'm not sure Goobums can really solve that puzzle, but here we go. We are moving over to Goobums' board, and it's going to be interesting to see how this matchup shakes out. Zaya theoretically can beat the Seraphine board, but it's just a Shyvana 1 right now. Another amazing Thieves' Gloves roll from Jace. So with the Beast in, with the 6 Rage Wing, is that going to be enough, or is Kurum really just the strongest board in this lobby?
Yeah, meanwhile, Soju is also going against Sully, tries to get that win to potentially stay alive. Here comes the Dragon's Ascent. Great Hecarim ult as well. And with this press the attack, putting out a lot of true damage, could find ways to slice and dice through the Seraphine comp. And now you can see a little bit as to why a lot of people really like this Seraphine, or rather the Zaya comp, into the Seraphine in particular. Kurum does take a loss. It looks like Sully ends up losing to Soju, though. So it's heating up. All of a sudden, I kind of expected after 3 rounds to find out who would be our top 2, but it's still up for grabs.
Yeah, it is still up for grabs. Some of these matchups are really tough to call. A lot of unusual boards in the situation. Soju's able to get a big fight win going up against Sully, and Soju with that Dragon's Claw on the Itis. The Eep got stuck onto the Itis for a much longer period of time in that fight, and that was what made the difference versus the last time those two boards played each other. We're still on board with Goobums.
Oh, wow.
That just doesn't have a ton of prospects operating his board. This is one of them. Is he willing to go for this Bard? And if so, what does he want to take out for it?
Remake Shyvana because he wants the Morello on it. I like that. Hecarim comes out too. Instead of playing 6 Rage Ring, playing 5. All right. It's definitely a little bit of a painful decision, but I agree with it on paper. I do think that this is too good of a unit to exclude from your composition as he goes up against Soju, who has the Dragons online, is at level 9. Let's see if this stacked Aurelian Soul in the back with Gunblade can get it done for Soju with 2 Dragons, with 2 Gunblades. Can he find a way to withstand the pressure? The Black Hole is not able to deal significant damage to the backline. Shyvana also kind of just tanking a lot of dangerous damage, and I think Goobums has done it. There's not enough from this Dragon. Soju is barely alive at 2 HP, and Sully takes a massive loss to Kurum X. I can't believe,
after all of that,
That was the hardest fourth that I've ever seen anyone earn in a tournament game of TFT.
You know what, Soli, that may have functionally eliminated you from this tournament, but you fought the good fight, brother. It was an absolute pleasure to watch you in the LCQ and popping off on North America's biggest stage. You are a fun player to watch, and you will be back. Thank you for the fun games as we see last-second swapping from Kurum in this Final 3. He knows he's going against Soju, and he's trying to get on the same side of those core dragons and circumvent this Itis if he can.
Oh my god, the Pantheon walks its way to the back. A positioning mishap from Kerman. Look at the Graves, completely ignoring the front line. Wait a second, the Lee Sin kicking the back, though, may have been a blessing in disguise. The second cast of Black Hole is good to heal up the front line. Graves' Edge of Night is triggered, so the Dacia's not targeting it, but as soon as Zeri goes down, maybe he can start focusing it.
Asol's still alive!
Asol's still casting one more time. Third Black Hole is good! And that should mean that enough Ascension will deal damage to Kuramex. Soju stays alive and now is playing for top 2. We have 3 players joining us in Stage 7.
That fight was too much fun. Twitch chat has another meme to spam. That was a double Gunblade diff. You had the Gunblade brothers or sisters in the backline with Aurelion Sol and Deja, thank you, siblings, keeping each other alive. Asol almost died like 4 or 5 times, but the damage was coming through from Deja to keep the Asol alive. Then Asol would cast and keep itself alive, and ultimately that's such a close fight when I felt like Kurum outpositioned Soju in that fight, but it ultimately did not matter. We are heading into Stage 7 where everyone is on 1 life. What a wild finish we are in for.
It really depends on who is playing whose Ghost. So Soju played Kurum, which means that Goobums will be playing the non-Ghost. And then we'll find out who
Shyvana
will be
2.
the one that gets it. Goobums finds a way back to Shyvana 2, and now has been rewarded heavily for that decision. Soju's playing Goobums, but who gets the real Goobums? And more importantly, how do these positioning will determine who will be getting first? We could see a double kill.
We could see a double kill, some last-second repositioning from Soju. He decides to move this Aurelion Sol away from the try and spread out against this Xayah board so the feathers aren't going to get on everything at once.
All right, well, the spread out is good. Asol right now is completely uncontested, or rather not being aggroed upon. Deja does take the Dragon's Descent fully in the corner, but now we're about to hit the Ascension in just a couple of seconds. And now we have the Black Hole level up. Can Soju hold on just long enough to take down this Xayah? Xayah's resistances are too high, and I don't think he's able to do it. Goobums has eliminated Soju, and Kurum has outlasted. A valiant effort from Cloud9's K3 Soju, but Goobums will fight on as he is on a hot streak.
6 points for Soju in this game basically guarantees he advances. Even if he goes 8th next is 27, which is tiebreaker. If he goes not 8th, he very likely makes it in. But we have a final 1v1 here between Goobums, who is essentially guaranteed to advance because he's scored so many points today, and Kurum, who needs every point that he can get to cement his chances of making it onto the final day. 2 veterans who are used to playing on this stage. A lot of opportunity for outplay. Who is going to win this matchup?
A move up with the Rakan, a little bit of a protection onto the Itis. We'll see if that ends up working out. Maybe gets disarmed.
Oh, the Zephyr from Kurum!
The Dragon Set will be that much later, and the Lee Sin kicking back Itis. The Golden Scales are not going to activate until 10 seconds into the fight. That's massive. And Kurum, throughout positioning, may have done it. Goobums is usually the one putting the moves onto his opponents, but this time, this game, it comes down to Team Liquid's Kuramex. The Xayah is about to fall, and Kuramex, from the brink of elimination, goes back-to-back to put himself in Day 3 of the North American Regional Finals.
What a win from Kuramex. We talked about it at the top of the show. He goes 8th in the